merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and abounding in steadfast love. The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, beginning at the 26th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. I'd ask you to be seated. The Passion narrative that we are about to read is the preparation for the week that lies before us. It is the drama of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, which we have heard, and the events that take him to the cross and to the empty tomb. Ask that you find yourself amongst the folks who speak today in this reading. Find yourself, for it is for us that Jesus goes to the cross. Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me that I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where do you want us to make that preparation for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, 'Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me.' And they became greatly distressed and began to say to one another, after one another, 'Surely not I, Lord.' He answered, 'The one who dipped his hand in the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one had he not been born.' Judas, who betrayed him, said, 'Surely not I, Rabbi.' He replied, 'You have said so.' While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never drink it again of the fruit of the vine until that day comes when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.' When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, 'You will all become deserters because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go ahead of you into Galilee.' Peter said to him,
'Though all become deserters because of you, I will never desert you.'
Jesus said to him, 'Truly I tell you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him,
'Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you.'
And so said all the disciples. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I go over there to pray.' And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be grieved and agitated. He said to them, 'I am deeply grieved, even unto death. Remain here and stay awake with me.' And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, 'My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want.' Then he came to his disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, 'So you could not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into a time of trial. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak.' And he went away for a second time and prayed, 'My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done.' Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for a third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up and let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand.' While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived with and with him a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying,
"The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him."
At once he came up to Jesus and said,
"Greetings, Rabbi,"
and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly one of those who with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put back your sword into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you not think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then could the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this all has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last 2 came forward and said,
"This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.'"
The high priest stood up and said,
"Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?"
But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him,
"I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God."
Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said,
"He has blasphemed. Why do you still need witnesses? You have now heard this blasphemy. What is your verdict?"
And they answered,
"He deserves death."
Then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying,
"Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is that struck you?"
Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him and said,
You also were with Jesus the Galilean."
But he denied it before them all, saying,
"I do not know what you are talking about."
When he went out to the porch, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders,
"This man was with Jesus of Nazareth."
Again he denied it with an oath.
"I do not know the man."
After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter,
"Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you."
Then he began to curse, and he swore an oath.
"I do not know that man."
At that moment, the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away to be delivered to Pilate, the governor. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that he was also condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying,
"I have sinned in betraying innocent blood."
They said,
"What is that to us? See to it yourself."
And throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed. And he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said,
"It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they are blood money."
So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying,
And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me.
Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him,
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
Jesus said, "You have said so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he made no answer. Then Pilate said to him,
"Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?"
But he gave them no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor greatly wondered. Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to releasing for the crowd any one of the prisoners for whom they wanted. They had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them,
"Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas, or Jesus, who is called Christ?"
For they knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides this, he was sitting on the judgment seat. His wife sent word to him,
"Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much over him today in a dream."
Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the people to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them,
"Which of the two do you want me to release for you?"
And they said,
"Barabbas."
Pilate said to them,
"Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?"
They all said,
"Let him be crucified."
And Pilate said,
"Why? What evil has he done?"
But they shouted all the more,
"Let him be crucified."
So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying,
"I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves."
And all the people answered,
"His blood be on us and on our children."
Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and plaiting a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and put a reed into his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying,
"Hail, King of Jews!"
And they spat on him, and they took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put on his own clothing, and led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. This man they compelled to carry the cross. And when they came to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mingled with gall. But when Jesus tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him. And over his head they had put the charge against him, which read,
"This is Jesus, the King of the Jews."
Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying,
"You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross."
So also the chief priests and the scribes and the elders mocked him, saying,
"He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him, for he said, 'I am the Son of God.'"
And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Now it was about the 6th hour. There was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders hearing it said,
"This man is calling Elijah."
One of them ran at once and took a sponge, filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But others said,
"Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him."
And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went about into the city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what had taken place, they were filled with awe and said,
"Truly, this was the Son of God."
There were also many women there, looking on from afar, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and departed. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the sepulchre. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said,
"Sir, we remember how the impostor said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' Therefore order the sepulchre to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first."
Pilate said to them,
"You have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can."
So they went and made the sepulchre secure by sealing the stone and setting it a guard. Thus far the gospel.